The following is a listener-supported ministry from the Grace Evangelical Society.
In the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus said, "If possible, let this cup pass from me," what did he mean by that? We have a discussion on that question today right here on Grace in Focus, and we're glad that you're joining us. Grace in Focus is the radio broadcast and podcast ministry of the Grace Evangelical Society. We are a focused free grace ministry. You can find out more about us at our website, faithalone.org. We have a national conference coming up in May that we hope you'd be interested in attending, and if so, find out details on that website, faithalone.org. Now, with today's question and answer discussion, here are Bob Wilkin and Ken Yates.
All right, so we're going to be dealing with some questions, and the first question we got comes from Matt, and he mentions that...
this is based on a show we did back in September where we talked about, did Christ want to go to the cross or not?
Right, and he had a question about our discussion on that particular podcast.
And just to remind people, we took the view that when Jesus says, "Father, if it's possible, take this cup from me, but not my will, but thy will be done," that what he was saying is, let me drink this cup. Let me go to the cross. But not because it's my will, but because it's your will.
Yes, that was our will, even though I think most, I don't know most, but probably most would say that what Jesus was saying was, I don't want to go to the cross.
Right.
I don't want to go to the cross, but okay, I'll do it after the temptation in the garden. So at first, most evangelicals would say Jesus did not want to obey the Father. So he, at that, hour and a half, whatever it was,
right,
was like, I don't want to do what you want to have me do.
And one of the things we pointed out is in John 12:27, which is just a short time before he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, he says, "Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? But for this purpose I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name." Just shortly before this, Jesus is saying, I'm not going to ask the Father to save me for this hour because this is why I came. This is the finished work. This is what the Father sent me to do. I've got to do this to finish the work. That's why his triumphant cry right at the end, "It is finished." It's all tied with Jesus wanting to go to the cross. So, but this leads to Matt's question.
Well, but most evangelicals say, yeah, all that's true. From the very beginning, even at his baptism, Jesus knew he was going to the cross. It is written. Mm-hmm. The Christ has to die, and Jesus obviously knows that. But most evangelicals would say that when he got to the garden, it changed.
Well, what people have here is Jesus having a split personality at this point. And they say in his humanity,
exactly,
he did not want to go to the cross, but in his deity, he did want to go to the cross. So when Jesus says, "If it's possible, let this cup pass from me," that's him speaking in his humanity.
Right.
But when he says, "Should I say, Father, save me from this hour," in John 12:27, that's him speaking from his deity.
Right.
And so you've got this. The problem with that view is that's heresy. You see, because Jesus was one person. He wasn't a split personality. Now, of course, there are many people who argue Jesus had two wills, and the two wills didn't have to be compatible. But in my estimation, that makes no sense. Jesus had one will. He was one person. And we don't see, it's not that we see a mixture of his deity and his humanity. He just is God and man together in one body. And there's no conflict with that.
Well, see, that's the other thing about the deity of Christ. I mean, the Orthodox statement of his deity is that he is one person. Two natures, one person.
Right.
Well, how can one person have a split personality like that?
Well, they say, the two natures is another question.
Right.
There's monophysitism, right, which is the idea that he had one nature that was this nature which was united in that his divine nature and his human nature were in agreement. For example, when we're glorified, right, in eternity future, will we want to sin ever again?
No.
So will we have anything in our nature that will be contrary to the will of God?
No.
So how would Jesus have anything contrary to the will of God unless he didn't have perfect humanity? Which is what a lot of people believe, that he had basically sinful humanity, and that he basically had a sin nature, and so he basically could have desires that were contrary to God. Well, they don't say that. What they say is, wait a minute, because he was born of a virgin, he didn't get a sin nature from his father, but yet they say, but yet he could want to disobey the Father. Well, isn't wanting to disobey the Father something that comes from the flesh, not from the Spirit?
I don't think we discussed this in September, but I want to run it by you, and let's just put it down on our level. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's say I know that something is sinful.
Right.
I know that something is contrary to God's word.
Right.
Okay. Let's say I want to have an affair.
Right.
Or, okay, I'm married, I want to have an affair. I know that's contrary to God's will.
Right.
Would it be sinful for me to say, I really want to do that? Would that be a sinful desire? Lord, I want to have this affair, but if you still don't want me to do it.
Not my will, but thy will be done.
Yeah, your will be done. Wouldn't that be a sinful desire?
It seems to me
to pray for it. Pray for it. Say, Lord, let me do this.
You would need to confess that desire. Well, of course, part of the problem here, Ken, and this is, and I hope y'all can hear my struggling, because there is a difference between temptation and sin.
Please plan to join us at Camp Copus in Denton, Texas. The Grace Evangelical Society's 2025 National Conference is May 19th through 22nd. Good fun, wonderful fellowship, recreational opportunities for the younger ones and the older ones, great teaching. Our theme this year is dispensationalism and rewards. VBS for kids, too. More information and early bird registration now at faithalone.org/events. That's faithalone.org/events. Please come and join us.
There is a difference between temptation and sin. Luther used to say, and I think this is, at least I repeat this a lot on the air, and I think it's true, you can't keep the birds from flying overhead, but you can keep from nesting in your hair. So if you see a beautiful woman and the fleeting thought comes to you that she's beautiful, and you might entertain the thought, what would it be like if I was with her? But then you acknowledge that's a wrong thought, and you turn your thoughts to the Lord and away from that, and you don't allow that thought to bring forth to sin. Well, then it seems to me you haven't sinned. But on the other hand, if you do that and then you start fantasizing about that,
or even
you've now crossed the line.
Or even ask God, because that's what Jesus does in the garden, right? I want to do this. I know it's not your will, but I'm asking you to do this for me. I mean, that's what he's doing in the garden. If we understand, let this cup pass from me, what Jesus is saying is, I know this is not your will, but I want you to do it for me.
Oh, I want you to let me not go to the cross.
Yes. I mean, isn't that what...
If that's possible.
That seems to be what the...
Of course, that's another issue because Jesus knew it was not possible.
That's my point.
So it wouldn't make any sense.
Right.
But would it be sin? Probably not. If all he's saying is, hey, I'm ready to go to the cross, but is there some other way? Even though I know there's no other way. By the way, James 1:15 comes to mind. That's where James says, then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. The desire itself is not sin, but when it achieves a certain state of maturity, it has conceived. He's using the picture of birth here, and he's saying it gives birth to sin. And then sin, when it's full grown, when the sin matures, it brings forth death.
Right.
So what he's saying is, in your sequence here, if you're thinking about an affair, that in itself is not yet sin. But if you dwell on it, it becomes sin. Even before you have the affair, it becomes sin, right? Didn't Jesus say, if you lust in your heart after a woman? Sure.
And so my question would be, I know we don't know the answer to this, if in the garden he's saying, okay, I know it's your will that I go to the cross. I don't want to go to the cross, and I want you to do that for me. Is that dwelling on it? Is that like, okay?
Probably not, but the whole thing to me is nutty. Because Jesus did want to go to the cross. He said that just before this, and his whole life was pointed to the cross. Remember in Matthew 16 when he tells them, I'm going to Jerusalem, I'm suffering, I'm going to be mistreated, they're going to kill me, and I'm going to rise on the third day. And Peter says, God forbid, meganoita, this will never happen to you, right?
Right.
And then Jesus rebukes him. Get behind me, Satan.
All right.
And then he says, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Now, Jesus is not denying himself, taking up his cross and following him. Wasn't Jesus going to take up his own cross? So it seems to me this whole discussion doesn't make any sense, and it leads ultimately to a very confused God-man, a very confused Messiah who is torn. And I would say, no, that's not right.
And it's certainly out of character his whole life. I mean, his whole ministry, my hour has not yet come. He knows his hour's coming. He knows his hour's coming. But it's just that what?
But now he says, my hour has come.
Right. And so now for what, an hour and a half in the garden, he's struggling with it.
I don't think he's struggling. I mean,
that's the typical evangelical view of it.
But but I would say is the agony he's going through is recognizing the pain and suffering that he's about to undergo.
And he wants it to pass through him.
Right. But if you read in the Old Testament about this idea of the cup of God's wrath, it never passes for a nation or a people group or a city until they have drunk from the cup. In other words, if the Canaanites are to drink the cup of God's wrath, that is not going to pass until they drink it. When Jesus says, let this cup pass from me, he's saying, let me drink of the cup. Let me go to the cross.
That was our view in September.
Right. And we're not going to have time today to get into Matt's question.
We'll do part two.
We'll do a part two.
We'll do a part two on Matt's question.
But what I want to say is that our Savior wanted to go to the cross, willingly went to the cross. Remember Hebrews 12, verse 2, who for the joy, or verses 1 and 2, who for the joy set before him endured the cross.
The joy of the coming kingdom, of reigning over the coming kingdom.
Right. So he's our model, right? If you go to the book of Hebrews, which the question for Matt is going to be about.
And that'll be part two here.
He's our model.
Right.
And so we should follow him, like Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. Well, we're out of time. I know I've stumbled around here a lot in this one. I hope I have provided something helpful. I know Ken has. But my encouragement to all of you is to meditate on this important subject, because something's not right just because Dr. Schmotzkopf says it's right, just because church tradition says it's right. And it's not right because Ken and I say it. It's right if the Bible teaches it. So meditate on these things and remember to keep grace in focus.
Be our guest and subscribe to our 48-page magazine, 6 issues per year, also called Grace in Focus, by emailing your name and snail mail address to ges@faithalone.org. That's faithalone.org. On this program, we keep our requests for financial partners to a minimum. But if you are interested in becoming a financial partner with Grace in Focus, you can find out how to do that at faithalone.org.